This is on getting teaching into your letters of recommendation, letters of reference. I want to start with big picture considerations, right? And I want you to all to be thinking about, just as there's a narrative about who you are as a scholar across your application materials, so too do I want you to be thinking about what the narrative about your teaching is across your cover letter, your CV, the teaching portfolio, and then obviously your letters. And really think who among your letter writers is equipped to write about what aspects of your professional development. And I would also say that in the North American context, letters of reference tend to be long and detailed, right? These are not British letters of reference, which say, "Dear committee, I commend Petrie to you. He is adequate, sincerely yours." These are going to run 3 pages, sometimes 4 pages, right? And I want you to have letters where somebody writes for 2 pages about your project and then says, in addition to this, she is a teacher of considerable promise. Let me tell you how I know this. All right. So I really want to emphasize that you've got to make a plan for this with your mentors or your committee, right? And we can talk about the challenges of getting folks organized to, on your behalf. But this is absolutely something that folks should be willing to talk to you about and make a plan for how this is going to be handled, because I want all of you to have your accomplishments represented as fully as can be in the context, obviously, as you all know, of a ludicrously competitive job market. So how do you get teaching into your letters? The best case scenario, and I was extremely lucky to have had this be my situation, where you TA for somebody who's on your committee, right? They know your project, they can write it about your dissertation, and they know you're teaching. And ideally, they've observed you teach perhaps more than once. That's the best case scenario. Now, lots of folks aren't going to be in that situation. You didn't TA for anyone on your committee, you TA'd for somebody else. They can write something and send it to one of your letter writers, one or more of your letter writers. Again, preferably someone has observed you. Again, I know that this is not common in lots of disciplines. I dearly wish that it were common, but it's totally legitimate for someone to say, I haven't had the opportunity to see Joseph teach, but let me share with you some reflections from my colleague for whom Joseph TA'd. Insert paragraph of glowing account of what a terrific TA you were, or whatever the teaching context is. Totally normal, not a problem at all. Or you could have somebody that's observed you teach actually become a dedicated teaching letter where they are added to your set of letters. In any scenario, right, you want to share with your letter writers your teaching materials, right? Some of the things that we talked about in the last session, but you want to share with them your evals, your sample syllabi, lesson plans, anything to get them acquainted with the way that you teach. Again, this is extra important if they haven't actually seen you teach, right? So that they can still talk about what they've learned about how you teach. And they need to, you have to make them talk to you about this, right? It doesn't need to be, a 3-hour conversation, but your letter writers should be willing to sit down with you and learn about your teaching so that they can write about it. And, this is not to endorse the state of academia, but the gatekeeping role of these faculty letters is profoundly important. And that's why I want you to have the most robust faculty letters. We could debate whether this is an appropriate form of gatekeeping, but that's a different conversation. If at all possible, get someone to watch you teach. All right. Maybe it happened when you were a TA. Maybe you finished your teaching, and can you engineer a guest lecture? Reach out to a mentor and say, hey, the homunculus from CTL told me I should get observed. Can I drop in on your class and do a guest lecture so that that person can then say, let me tell you about the terrific guest lecture. Like, you want people to be able to write in detail, to say, I was there in the classroom and here's what I saw the candidate doing? This is how she explained this difficult concept to the students, and I could see that they understood. Here's how he effortlessly managed a conversation about a difficult text. Like it's got to be granular, right? And again, this is not necessarily going to be true in other national contexts, but this is what the bar is for letters in North America. Next best, you could get recorded. Want to get recorded? Talk to me. I'm happy to help you out with this. I don't know how often this happens, to be honest, but there have been mentors who have sat down and watched a recording of their mentee teaching so as to be able to talk about it. All right. And again, this is, you all deserve this, and you need it. This is I reached out to some folks. If you don't believe me, you can believe Penn faculty. Here's the perspective of a professor in the humanities. I won't read the slide, but I think just confirms part of what I've said, right? That, being able to talk about what went well in a specific classroom context when they saw their mentee, and then talking about the value of having access to the other teaching materials to be able to write about that. And then also, as I said, quoting appraisals by other colleagues. So again, this is a person that I reached out to because I know how seriously they take this role, and I respect them enormously for that. Some of your departments may or may not have a so-called placement officer who is supposed to sort of run point for the cohort of job seekers. Here's the position of such a person, echoing some of the things that I've already told you about how they try to coach candidates who aren't their own student, but who they're trying to help, and trying to find things across the teaching materials. What are some cool things about this person as a teacher that I can highlight in a letter? Another piece that I think is important, and again, I want to emphasize, what are the pieces that committees might most immediately pay attention to? Your cover letter, your CV, and the faculty letters. Not all folks are asking for these up front. Your experience will vary, but eventually there are going to be these faculty letters coming into play. And given the authority invested in faculty letters, I think here there's an opportunity for, again, your faculty to help contextualize your teaching experience, especially if there have been some vicissitudes, right? So that if you've got some evals that might appear low, maybe one of your faculty can talk about the context of that particular course and its place in the curriculum, or who's in the room in that class that might explain why student reaction to the course was not necessarily all that enthusiastic. Or in some cases, you might not have evaluations for some teaching contexts. It's good for a faculty letter writer to account for that. Amazingly, in 2022, there are still corners of Penn's campus where graduate student instructors are not getting evals. And so, again, your faculty need to be invested in learning about your teaching and being able to represent it. But again, I want to plug what my colleagues and I can help you with: consultations around your teaching related job materials, mock interviews, consultations around the weirdness that is a teaching demonstration, where you might be dropped into an actual class, or you're teaching to a room full of students mustered for this occasion, or you're doing a teaching demonstration only with faculty. All very strange and awkward. We're happy to help and do lots of practice sessions, mock teaching demos with folks. And we're happy to do all of these things with you in person or via Zoom, as hiring processes continue to be a mixture of those things. All right.